Narayana Samadambam Vyasa Shankara Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Ishaya Namah. This video is some additional thoughts on a video I posted previously, Q&A number 3, Bhakti and the concepts of real and unreal. So if you haven't already watched that video, please do, or else this video won't make a lot of sense. I did say in the last video the most important things that I needed to say. However, when I went back and was editing it and watching it, I realized that there was probably a few more additional comments I could make in regard to this part of the question. Here is my doubt. Before, now, tomorrow are the concepts of time. One can say that something is changeable or unchangeable only with respect to time. So time is primary of all of these notions. This actually isn't true. Time is not primary to the notion of change, because time itself is actually subject to change. And this is a matter of our own experience. We can see that 90 minutes in an interesting movie, 90 minutes playing a sport that we like basketball or football, or 90 minutes spent in the company of an interesting person that we love, is not the same as 90 minutes in the dentist's chair, 90 minutes sick in bed with the flu, or 90 minutes spent at work doing a job that we don't like. Now, if time really were an independent, constant entity, then it wouldn't be subject to external factors, such as your own personal subjective experience. But we can see that 90 minutes in the dentist chair feels like hours, whereas 90 minutes in an interesting movie or in the company of somebody we love feels like 30 minutes. Now, if time, again, were a constant entity, then there wouldn't be this difference in experience. You would experience time exactly the same all the time in any situation. So you can see, using those very common examples, that time itself is subject to change, and so therefore it can't be primary or prior to change. Another thing that you can see, and this is an example used by science, is that time is also subject to environmental factors. Okay, in the first example, we're saying it's subjective factors. It's affected or changed by the way that you perceive time depending on the circumstance that you're in. But we can also see from science that time is changed by environmental factors, and the example that I'll use is of the atomic clock. Now, you can have two identical atomic clocks that are regulated by an atomic element like cesium. Both of those clocks can be shown to be functioning absolutely perfectly in a mechanical sense. However, if you have one of those clocks sitting on Earth and you have one of those clocks rotating the Earth on a satellite or a space station, those two clocks will actually get out of sync from one another. It's not much, but it still shows that time is not constant in that in that instance. And the reason being that time is actually affected by gravity. Gravity actually warps space-time, so you can have a difference in two identically functioning clocks based on where they're at, such as Earth or space, where the gravitational pull is different. Again, if time were a constant, definitively measurable entity, then it would be the same regardless of subjective factors or regardless of environmental factors such as gravity. So again, time itself is subject to change. And the third example, again, is a subjective one, but it's one that we're all familiar with. We've already seen how in the waking state, depending on the circumstances you're in, that the passage of time will be experienced in different ways. But if we also go from the waking state to the dream state to the deep sleep state, time also changes, because the way you experience time in the waking state is different than the way you experience time in the dream state. For instance, in the dream state, you can have a dream that seems to go on for hours and hours, or even days or months or years, and in actuality, the passage of time has only been a couple of minutes. Now again, if time were a constant, definite entity on which we could base change, then it would always be the same. 3 minutes in the waking state would be the exact same as 3 minutes in the dream state, but they're not. 3 minutes in the waking state could be 3 days in the dream state. So again, that shows us that time is subject itself to change. Further, when you go into deep sleep and you're not dreaming at all, time completely disappears. There's no time, no experience of time, no experience of the passage of time when you're in deep sleep. If time were a present and ever-present entity, then it wouldn't be subject to your own personal experience. It would just be there. Again, 3 minutes in the waking state would be the same as 3 minutes in the dream state, would be the same as 3 minutes in the deep sleep state. From the waking state to the dream state, the experience of time is different. Time changes. In deep sleep, time disappears altogether. Time isn't always, one thing becoming another thing. Change is not always one thing becoming another thing. It's shifting from state to state, or even appearing and disappearing. That also is change. So from dream state to deep sleep state, time totally disappears. So we can see that time itself changes based on subjective experience and environmental factors. We can't say that change is based on time, because time is actually a measurement of change. Okay, time only exists because we need a way to measure between two changes. That's all that really time is. If I say 6 seconds has passed, what I'm saying is that there appears to be 6 seconds that have happened from this event to this event. Now, to say that this event became this event 6 seconds later, a change occurred. The circumstances changed. The objects that appear change. So you can see that time really only exists because change exists. We need a way to somehow explain or structure our reality, the apparent reality that we experience. We have to, make references somehow to these different kinds of changes and make sense of them. Okay, we have to say that, yesterday this happened, an hour ago this happened, or something's going to happen an hour from now or tomorrow. All that is a arbitrary measurement that we superimpose onto the apparent reality. It doesn't have any actual reality because it's only a measurement between two changes. And again, that's not necessarily constant, because even though technically, the hand of the clock went around one full rotation to make an hour, that 1 hour is experienced differently depending on what circumstance you're in. Okay, so we can see that change is not based on time. Time only exists because it tries to make an explanation of change. It tries to put structure onto change in order for us to be able to speak to one another about things that happen, in order for us to be able to try to put some kind of structure onto the apparent reality so we can function. And we have to have this apparent division of time in order to be able to function in our everyday lives. So one might argue, well, there is an actual passage between two events. But that isn't true either. There's not an actual 6 seconds that happens between one event and another. There's not an actual hour that happens between one event and another. There's not a distance between yesterday and today. Change itself is outside of time. And the reason being is that change never occurs in the past. Change never occurs in the future, which are concepts based on time. Do you ever experience a change yesterday? Are you experiencing a change yesterday right now? No. Do you ever experience a change in the future? No. Do you ever experience the past? You do not. Do you ever experience the future? You do not. The only thing that you ever experience is what? The present moment. The present moment is always present. You're only experiencing the present all the time. That's it. So what's happening is that there is change in the present moment continuously. That's all. If you say, well, someone's going to come to my house in an hour, you don't experience them coming to your house in the future. So you never actually experience the future. You only experience a change in the circumstances in the present moment. That's all. Change is happening only in the present moment, and therefore it is outside of time. In fact, there is only the present moment, and so because of that, there is no actual time. Again, it's an arbitrary distinction that we try to put onto the present moment in order for us to be able to discuss it or to structure it in a way that we can lead our apparent lives. So for all of these reasons, time itself is based on change. Okay? Time is something that is put onto change in order to try to structure it or measure it. Time itself changes. It is subject to change. So again, it's not prior to change. It comes after change, or it depends on change. It is subject to change. Time, if it were a constant entity that was measurable and totally observable, it would always be present. It would always be the same. But based on subjective factors, it's not always the same, and it's not always present. Now, granted, what I said in the previous video was really the most important thing. What I'm talking about in this video are just some picky points, just in case any doubts remained. But I'll go back to try to put this into the context of Vedanta one more time. It is true that change, time, real, unreal, even duality and non-duality, all of those things are in fact concepts. And the person that asked this question very appropriately and astutely pointed that out. So this is true. All of those things are concepts. However, where we find ourselves apparently is in this dualistic world. That's what it seems like. And in this dualistic world where we suffer from ignorance, then we need a teaching method for us to get out of that ignorance. That teaching method itself, Vedanta, is a dualistic means. It appears in the apparent dualistic reality, and it therefore is apparent and dualistic. And because of that, it uses concepts. I mean, we can't have a teaching without words and without concepts. So it is true that all of these things are based on conceptual things. There really is only one thing that is non-conceptual. Okay, and ironically, that's what the teaching based on concepts and ideas helps you to understand ultimately. Okay, ultimately, the teaching that is a dualistic method based on concepts helps you to, through understanding, negate and work your way out of all concepts and all duality because you gain knowledge or lose ignorance of, whichever way you want to look at it, of the self. Okay, you either gain knowledge of the self or lose ignorance of the self, whichever way you want to look at it. And that knowledge shows you that there is no concepts. There's the appearance of concepts, but there's no actual concepts. There is no time. There is no change or unchanging. There is no real and unreal. There is no duality and non-duality. There is only you, the self. And that supersedes all concepts. Purnamidaf, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamadachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.